Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is not Pei Gimel and Gitin. Pei Gimel. We are a week away from the Siyum Rez Hashem. Yesterday we began a parak which talked about if a person divorced his wife and he says you're free to marry anybody in the world except for him, except for Yankel. In terms of Yankel, you're still married. Does that work? Or do you have to be? So Rabbanan say no. If you have to be totally cut off. In other words, she has to be totally cut off from the husband in the sense that she can marry anybody. If he puts any stipulations on her, you're divorced except for this guy. Except for this guy. From this guy, you're not divorced. And as far as you're divorced from me, but as far as that guy's concerned, you're still married to me. That doesn't work. But Rabbi says it does work. And we had a machlokas, the Shiur in the Mishnah and in the Brisa. Did he say, I'm divorcing you except for Yankel? In other words, as far as Yankel's concerned, you're still married to me? Or did he say, I'm divorcing you on the condition that you don't marry Yankel? On the condition that you don't marry Yankel. And that's different because the condition, a lot of conditions. I'm divorcing on the condition that you give me $1,000 by next week. She's divorced right now, and he has to fulfill the condition. So, but in any case, Rabbi Lezer said that it works. She could be divorced that way. We don't hold like Rabbi Lezer, but all the rabbis now got together and asked on Rabbi Lezer. Tell them about what's it based on. So we as a machlokas also yesterday, two different opinions. One is it says v'yatzmi beisov as long as she's free to marry one other guy, she's divorced, even if she can't marry other people, right? We say except for Yankel, it could be Yankel and 20 other people, right? Another pasuk is based on Isha Gushami, Isha Lo Yikachu. Even if she's divorced just from her husband, famous says if a Kohen says to his wife, I'm divorcing you, but you can't marry anybody else. She can't stay with him anymore because she's a little bit divorced. I'm divorcing you, but you can't marry anybody else. But she's a shtickle divorce, as we say. She's also to marry a Kohen. So based on that pasuk also, if you're divorced a little bit, it's good enough. Based on those two psukim, we have these different opinions. Now, all the rabbis got together and they asked on Rav Lezer. That we don't hold that way. A divorce means you're divorced and you're free to marry anybody in the world. Obviously, she can't marry a Kohen, people she can't marry, right? If she's divorcee. But as far as the first husband's concerned, she's totally divorced. That's the only way it works. You can't say, I divorce you except for this guy. Now, I divorce you on the condition that you don't marry this guy. According to the first opinion we had in the Gemara, it's mashma, yesterday's Gemara, that even the rabbis would be noted there. I'm divorcing you on the condition that you don't marry Joe. Okay, so she's divorced. She just didn't marry Joe. But if she marries Joe, the divorce is not valid. And if she married somebody else in between, those kids would be mamzerim. Big problem. That's one of the problems that they had with Rabbi Lezer. Tana Rabbanim. It's 8 lines down on Pegim of Al. After Rabbi Lezer died, as Rabbi Lezer had this opinion that you can be divorced from everybody except for one person or two people or whatever. That works according to Rabbi Lezer. After he died, Nichtus Arbus came in 4 elders, 4 rabbis, to refute his words. Anyway, who are the 4 rabbis? Rabbi Yosef Glilu, Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Akiva. These 4 great rabbis, among the greatest to know, they came and they refuted. Each had a different opinion why Rabbi Elazar can't be right. What do you mean you can divorce? You can be divorced from your husband, and you still can't marry Joe. Let's call him Joe. You can't marry Joe. What kind of a divorce is that? So then Rabbi Tarfon Amar. I'll tell you why it can't work. Okay, let's say he said to her, I'm divorcing you from everybody except for Joe. Okay, as far as Joe's concerned, you're still married to me. Now she goes and she marries Joe's brother, and Joe's brother dies with no children. What happens? She falls yibum to Joe, but she can't marry Joe. So what happens there? He says, she marries Joe's brother, Umeis below bottom, and Joe's brother dies with no kids. That means she falls even to Joe. Now she's got a problem because she can't marry Joe. I divorce you from every. As far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to the original husband number 1. How does that work? So it comes out now. You are uprooting a rule in the Torah. You can't do yibum, right? Because if she would marry, as far as Joe is concerned, she's still married to her first husband. Because according to we don't hold that way. All this we don't hold. But Rabbi Lezer says you could divorce her from you, and she's free to marry everybody except for Joe. As far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to husband number 1. How can that be? And if he says, how could that be? If that would be the case, now she's free to marry anybody. She marries Joe's brother, and Joe's brother has no kids. She falls even to Joe, but she can't marry Joe because as far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to number 1. So you're okay, and this can't be. How you're uprooting a rule of Yibam, increases. This is not a proper divorce, and it doesn't work. So he refutes Rabbi Lezer's opinion. All these rabbis are refuting Rabbi Lezer. Then Rabbi Yosef Glilu also got up and said something. Rashi says an interesting line. He says, Nan means Hayrim Kol, he raised his voice. Kol Aniyah Ksuva B'Torah, Haramas Kol. You notice he says Haksuva B'Torah. It's written, calls the Gemara also Haksuva B'Torah. The Gemara is also HaTorah. Whenever it says Nana, means he raised up his voice. He says, what's going on over here? So Rabbi Yosef Gluli had another refutation of Rabbi Lezer. What are you talking about? She's divorced. She's mutter to marry any guy in the street, but she can't marry Joe. Where do you find something like that? How do you find that she's usher to this guy, mutter to this guy? If she's married, she can't marry anybody else, and if she's mutter, she can marry everybody. Doesn't make sense. So this is not a proper divorce, and Rabbi Lezer is wrong. Rabbi Eliezer is wrong. And then Rabbi Lozer ben Azariah, the Tana we're talking about is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Lozer ben Azariah gave a different refutation. He's Amar, creases davar cross beit al-banam. The pasuk says, "V'nasan la sefer creases v'nasan biyad." Right? V'nasan sefer creases v'nasan biyad. How do you divorce your wife? You write a sefer creases, a sefer of cutting off, of amputating the marriage totally. Of course, it's something that cuts them off totally, and this is not cut off totally because as far as Joe is, I'm divorcing you from everybody, but as far as Joe is concerned, you're still married to me. She's not divorced. Halamat doesn't work. Halamat changes creases. That's Rabbi Lezer's opinion. We'll see Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah is the strongest refutation because all these refutations will also be refuted in a few minutes. Then Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva gave two answers. Rabbi Kiva says, let's say, okay, husband number one divorced her, except with the exception of Joe. And we'll see, based on what we saw yesterday, some of these refutations have learned the Mishnah that he said, I'm divorcing you except for Joe, and some on the condition that you don't marry Joe. That's a little bit different, because on the condition could work. I'm divorcing you on the condition you don't marry this guy. That might work, but we'll see. Each one is a different refutation. She marries somebody, okay, she married some guy, divorced you from everybody except for Joe, and she married some other guy, Yankel. They had children, and then she was widowed or divorced from this other guy, Yankel. And now she married Joe. Listen carefully. The first husband divorced her on the condition she doesn't marry Joe, or I'm divorcing for everybody except for Joe. Okay, so she married somebody else, had children, everything. The second guy that she married died or divorced her, and then she married Joe, which she wasn't supposed to do. Comes out that what? That the marriage is not that the divorce wasn't the divorce if you hold it's on the condition. Now, in this case, we'll see what Kiva says it's like where he made it on the condition. I'm divorcing on the condition you marry Joe. So she married somebody else and they had children with the other guy. Then the guy died. Then she married Joe. Well, if she married Joe now, she wasn't divorced from the first guy. So the second marriage was the kids are mamzerim, because the first guy divorced her on the condition that she doesn't marry Joe. Eventually, she married Joe. She married Joe. She's not divorced.
Marriage in between.
In between, that's a real problem. It wasn't a marriage, according to this. According to this, it wasn't marriage. I'm divorcing on the condition you'll marry Joe. So she marries somebody else and has children. The other guy dies, second guy dies or divorces her. And then she marries Joe. She marries Joe now. The first divorce isn't a divorce. So the second kids from the second marriage are mamzerim. This is the refutation. Now, we're going to see an answer to this refutation in a few minutes. Wait a minute, we're not done. And this can't be. You can't have a kiss situation like that. Creases. This is not creases at all. So therefore, this is not a get. Again, Rabbi Kiva is refuting Rabbi Lezer. He says, doesn't make sense. You can't make a condition like that. Davar acher, another refutation. Rabbi Kiva has two refutations. Let's say Joe was the Cohen. Umes Hamagarish. Now she is. I'm divorcing you as far as everybody except for Joe. As far as Joe's concerned, you're still married to me, right? And now Mace Hamagarish. Now the first husband died. Now think carefully. The first husband divorced her except for Joe. As far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to the first husband. Now the husband died. Now when the husband died, what is her situation? Is she a divorcee or is she a widow? As far as Joe's concerned, she's a widow because she was never divorced as far as Joe is concerned. Remember, I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe. So as far as Joe's concerned, right, she's not a divorcee. She wasn't divorced. She's still married to the first guy. But the first guy now died. She is an almana, right? She's an almana as far as it's concerned. So now the Megarish, the guy who divorced her, died. So she's an almana as far as As far as Joe's concerned, she's an almana because she wasn't divorced as far as Joe is concerned. But grusha, it's a cotton, she's divorced from everybody else. As far as everybody else is concerned, she's a grusha. But Kal V'chomer now, he says, listen, we said before, if you're a grusha just a little bit, even though it's only an Israel lav, a Kohen cannot marry a grusha that's an Israel lav. You don't get death for that, right? Grusha, it's a kolam, the Kal V'chomer, ma grusha she kala, which is an easier, a lighter aveir. It's only a lav. You only get malchus for that. Asur b'shvil sad gevish shabbat, she can't marry. She can't marry Joe because of that. Eishes ishi chamura, if she's considered married as far as Joe is concerned. Lo kolshkein, certainly she shouldn't be able to marry anybody, basically, because since she's a stickle married, if she's married if she's divorced a little bit from somebody, she's divorced a little bit from somebody, she's also to marry Cohen entirely. So over here, she's certainly considered a married woman, right? Because she's still married as far as Joe is concerned. She was still married. So Eishes ishi chamura lo kolshkein, says Rashi. Eishes ishi chamura ein adin sheti aser etzel mishe tira etzlo neitzat isha shabbat. You say she's mutter to marry because he divorced her. Yeah, but she says she's partially married to Joe still. So if a partial get is enough to Issa Grusha, which is Kal, which is easier, it's only a lav. You see, she's also a Kohen because she because she's a stick. She's partially because she's partially divorced, even though she's not divorced as far as Joe is concerned. But she's partially divorced, so she can't marry a Kohen. So certainly she should be considered an Eishes Ish because she's married to Joe. She's married to the first husband as far as Joe is concerned. So if as far as Joe is concerned, she's still married, she should be considered married for everybody because she's a bigger chumrah. And this all doesn't work. Halamana change because therefore this is not a good get, and that's it. So all these rabbis refuted Rav Lezer. Amlan Rabbi Shua got up. Rabbi Shua was a fifth rabbi. He said, you don't answer a lion as a strong rabbi after he died. Rav Lezer died already. Can't refute him now. All these questions that we raise, all these refutations of Rav Lezer, you can slug up the refutation. In other words, you can refute the refutation, all of them, as we'll see. The bottom of Rav Lezer, except for Rav Lezer, the Leslie Pircha. Rav Lezer says simply, this is not cutting off. The Torah says, creases, you got to cut her off. Cut her off means totally, meaning you're totally cut off from the first husband. You're free to marry anybody. If he says you're free to marry anybody except for Joe, you're not really cut off from the first husband. The first marriage is not totally sliced off because as far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to the first husband. So therefore, that's not really a creases. That has no kasha. That's a good refutation. Tanya Miachim Rabbi Yossi. I agree with Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer's refutation more than the other. The other ones all have a problem in case he married this one and this one goes on. If she marries this guy, you can't have him. All these different questions, but you can refute all these. You can refute the refutation, as we'll see. But Rabbi Lezer says very simple. It's not creases. Creases means you're cut off from me totally. You're not married to me at all. You're free to marry. I never want to see you again. This when he says you're free to marry everybody except for Joe, meaning as far as Joe's concerned, you're still married to me. That's not creases. That's what Blazer Mazar, and we'll see that stands. Now, why are all these refuted? Amar Mar. Now we're going to analyze each one of the refutations and show how we refute them. Amar Mar. Then Rav Tafra answered from Maharei Shachos Ubenes Left Shosef. What happens? He said, I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe. All right, let's say she goes and marries Joe's brother. Right? That's Joe marries Joe's brother. And Joe's brother dies with no kids. But can't do Yibam now. Why? Because she can't marry Joe. Because as far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to the husband number one. So Gemara says, okay, what do you mean uprooting it? He uprooted it? Well, why did he uproot it? The first husband who said you can marry everybody except for Joe, he uprooted the rule of Yibam, right? What did he uproot? He made a condition which would uproot the halach of Yibam. Masna, what do you mean he made a condition? Did he tell her? The man divorced, the first husband divorced his wife. He says, you're divorced from everybody except for Joe. Did he tell her you got to marry Joe's brother? Of all the Jews in the world, right, that she could have married, she had to marry Joe's brother. He didn't tell you make it. He didn't do that. He causes her, if in case she marries Joe's brother, he causes her to be oker the lach of Yibam. So Elamayat, if that's the case, we learn in Yavamas, right? Are you supposed to? You can't marry your aunt, but you can marry your niece. In fact, it's a mitzvah to marry, let's say, your brother or your sister's daughter. Okay, let's say you marry your brother's daughter, and you die with no children. What happens to the daughter? She falls yibum to his brother, who's her father. Can't marry your father. So it's also you shouldn't marry your brother's daughter, because in case you die without children, she's not going to be able to do yibum because she can't marry her father, right? So you also that's also gorim. That's the kasha. That's taka the kasha. Oh, in case you marry Joe's brother, you won't be able to form yibum. So what? So there's no yibum in that case. That's not a kasha. Umay, how did Rav Tarfon understand Rav Lezer? Did Rav Lezer say chutz on yesterday's daf? Did he say, I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe? Or I'm divorcing on the condition you don't marry Joe? If he just says, I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe, so what's the problem if she marries Joe's brother? Mishra Shar Rav Lezer. We're going to see Rav Lezer holds another thing. Rav Lezer says, yes, he does say that's a proper divorce. You were divorced from everybody except for Joe. So she can marry anybody, but she can't marry Joe because as far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to the first husband. However, if she marries somebody else, even Rav Lezer says now, then the whole marriage is shut off. She could marry Joe subsequently. Right? Yeah, again, Rav Lezer says it's a divorce and you can't marry Joe. You can marry anybody. But if she marries anybody else, then the first marriage is totally cut off. And now the stipulation you can't marry Joe falls aside. So that's not a problem. What are you concerned about? Yibam, that's not a problem. Ibachutz Meshashar Blazer, the Tanya Moda Blazer, Blazer's Moda, the Megarish Ishto. If you divorce the wife, you can marry everybody except for Joe. She married somebody else, some stam guy Yankel. And she was widowed or divorced from this. She's allowed to marry Joe now. She has her love. Why? Because once she's married to a second person, she's totally cut off from the first marriage. You can't be married to two people at the same time, even partially. So even though he made a stipulation, Rav Lezer says, I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe. She can't marry Joe. As far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to first husband number one. But if she marries anybody else, including Joe's brother, anybody, then the first marriage is totally finished. And she could marry Joe now. So that's not a problem. So what's the kasha anyway? You have a problem with Eve. There's no problem with Eve there. She could marry Joe after she was married to Joe's brother and he died with no children. Elabal Manas. The answer is he learned, Rav Lezer said, is halacha Eve by Manas. I'm divorcing only by Manas, meaning Rav Lezer holds if you can't marry, you can't divorce from everybody except for Joe, but you could divorce her on the condition that you don't marry Joe, on the condition that you marry Joe. So if she marries Joe, that's a better divorce, right? I'm divorcing on the condition you don't marry Joe. If she marries Joe, the first divorce is not a divorce. That would be a problem. El Ba'almanas. And it comes out, if the issue is Almanas, I'm divorcing on the condition you don't marry Joe. And now what happens? She's married to Joe's brother, and Joe's brother died with no children. So she can't marry Joe. Why? Because if she marries Joe, then she was never divorced initially. And the second marriage would have been the Isser. So that's how Rav Tarfon understands the machlokas, not like we understood the Mishnah yesterday, but like the Bryce said yesterday, that the machlok, even Rav Lezer doesn't say that you could divorce her you're divorced already except for Joe, but he just says you could divorce somebody on the condition you don't marry Joe. That's a little bit easier because that's what he holds.
Yeah. The answer we used before, why does it apply in that case also? That if she marries somebody else, so then that's totally priestess already, and even the
that's right.
Fall away.
That's what the Gemara says. That's why Tarfon's kasha is not a kasha, because if even Rabbi Lezer holds that if she marries somebody else, then she could marry Joe afterwards. There's not a problem. But you're not going to be able to do yibam. You could marry yibam because you could do yibam because as soon as she married, even Rabbi. Yeah,
which is stronger than this.
Well, yeah, it works, but yeah.
So if she married somebody else, the almanas would also fall.
No, he doesn't say.
She can never go back to the first husband.
No, right.
So that's completely priestess.
Right, but because if you marry someone on the condition, and the condition is not fulfilled, then there's right. Let's say she divorced. I'll tell you a simple case. I'm divorcing on the condition you give me $1 million. You want a divorce? Give me $1 million. Okay. I'll give you till the end of the year to give you $1 million. By the end of Tufshin Pei Gimel, less than just a little over a month now, you don't come up with $1 million and not divorce. Now, meanwhile, so divorce is how right now. I'm divorcing you now. On the condition you don't give me $1 million by Rosh Hashanah. Then you have to give me $1 million. Comes Rosh Hashanah, she didn't pay the money. Then divorce retroactively is not divorce. She marries somebody in between. That's Eish Ish. So that's the problem. Yeah, the Almanas is stronger in that sense. Yes. Okay, now we have a second. Now we're going to deal. So that takes care of Rav Tarfon's kasha. Not really a kasha, so there's no yibum. Okay. Then Rabbi Yosef Glili. Right? Rabbi Segluli, what was his answer? What was his refutation? Where do you find that mutter to one, usher to the other one? How can you find this? She can marry anybody else, but she can't marry Joe. Says you don't find that very true kachim. True kachim, let's say, can only be by kohanim, or certain kachim can only be by kohanim, or people who are Torah, and truma only by kohanim. Shasul is that. It's also to a zar. Mutter is that. You do find things are mutter to one also. Well, but Isra Isha can be. I'm talking about Isra for a woman. Arias. What about Arias? A person can't marry his daughter or his sister, right? And then mutter to other people. So you do find also zeh, mutter zeh. But Ishas can mean with marriage. Arias ish. What do you mean Ishas ish? And Ishas ish is mutter to her own husband, also to everybody else. So you do find that. That's the kasha. Well, the rest of the guys, how could that be? She can't marry Joe, but she can marry everybody else. Yeah. Regular married woman can live with her husband, can't live with anybody else. That's not a kasha. Again, how did Segluli understand the machlokas? What did Rabbi say? Either of Almanas, if he says Almanas, listen to this. He says also what do you mean? If he says, listen to here's another problem. Listen to this problem. When he says, I'm divorcing on the condition you don't marry Joe. Okay. Let's say she just sleeps with Joe. She didn't marry him. Right? The condition wasn't broken, right? I'm divorcing on the condition you don't marry Joe. She sleeps with him. Did she marry Joe? No. So therefore, if it's almanas, so it's not also she's a mutter to Joe also. Biznus. She doesn't marry him. Ella bachutz. He owns a bachutz like we saw in the Mishnah. Okay. The third one. Then Rabbi Kiva. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Condition, you could make a condition. They won't allow it today. I'm sure the rabbis won't allow it today, but technically a condition. Yeah. That's how it's. You could do things on condition. Yeah. You can marry her on the condition, you could divorce on condition. That's how the halacha works. Yeah, you could do it. Yeah. Why? You're right. People do problems, There are problems in the world. Yeah. But that was a condition. It's a deal. You can make such a condition. Now, it's got to be conditions we'll see that can be fulfilled. If it's a condition that binds her forever. For example, we're going to see in today's more. I'm divorcing on the condition that you don't drink wine the rest of your life. So her whole life, she's bound with that condition. That's not a divorce. It's got to be a condition that could be cut off. So in a sense, your point's well taken, that it's got to be a condition that has a finite time to it. If it's not never ending, I'm divorcing you that on the condition that for your entire life you can't do a certain thing. That's not a marriage. That's not a cutting off. That's right. Rabbi Lezer, we don't hold like Rabbi Lezer. This is all explaining Rabbi Lezer. We don't hold that way. Understand? But a condition the Rabbanim would say. In other words, Rabbi and Sanar Mishnah is it's only bachutz, but Almanas even the Rabbanim say you can make a condition as long as it's finite. Yeah. Prenup is it depends how it's written. There's kosher prenups, there's not kosher prenups. There's kosher ones supposedly, but even then you have to have a divorce. You have to make it the rules. What does the prenup say? That the marriage is not a marriage if such and such that the marriage is annulled. That's very complicated to annul the marriage today. It's the Chum had the power to do it in certain cases, but the rabbis today wouldn't do it. The prenups today work basically with financial incentives. Like they make a condition, like all the, they get anything. You say if you're not living together for 30 days time or something like that, we're going to take 100,000 shekels out of your account every day till you're totally bankrupt or whatever. Those are the only conditions that are accepted. Okay, and unless you give a divorce, but they force the person to give a divorce by financial incentives. Then Rabbi Kiva. Now the Rabbi Kiva, we said Rabbi Lezer Mazaria's his point is well taken. Of course, Rabbi Kiva, the fourth one. He said, let's say she goes and marries somebody else. She had children, and the second guy, widowed, died or divorced her. And then she married this guy, right, Joe, Shinesrelov, let him to get batal. How can you have the get will be batal and the kids will be hamzerim? So the Gemara says, okay, same thing. This is what Neil asked, right? So you can't make any condition. If this is a condition, you can't marry on the condition you don't marry Joe. Okay, and she might marry somebody else, have children, and then she marries Joe, and then she's like she was never divorced, right? So you can say any condition you can do that. Any condition. I make a condition and you give me $1 million by Rosh Hashanah. She marries somebody else and has children. Then she doesn't come up with the money. So the whole thing is bottled, and she said, she comes out, she's a married woman who married somebody else, who lived with somebody else. Any tonight, Nami looked at if she shouldn't get married. Maybe don't be proud to get mamzerim. That's the kasha. That's why it's not a good kasha. Over my Again, if you said b'chutz, she is mutter to marry the guy, right? She's she's mutter to marry the guy. Subsequently, if she married somebody else in between, according to Blazer says, Meshashara Blazer at the time, he says, Mara your Blazer, Megav Shadish Ramala Migdash Chola Chutz Me Ploni. I'm divorcing except for body. When she married somebody else, she married a second time between the Skasha. She's mutter to marry Joe now. He said El Bal Manas. We're talking about his cash was Al Manas. If that's the case, if you're divorcing her almanas, that what you don't marry Joe. If she marries somebody else and has children, and then she goes and marries Joe subsequently, comes out that the kids are mamzerim. No, that's not a kasha. Why? Not a kasha. Rabbi Kiva's kasha is not a kasha. Why? Because Rabbi Lezer holds there. If she marries somebody else, then the first condition is then she's allowed to marry Joe. Those it falls off. Davar Acher. Rabbi Kiva has two kashas. Remember the Davar Acher on the first of the wide lines. We're now 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Going. Let's say Joe is a Kohen, who mace Hamagarish. And after the guy, again, he said, I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe. Joe was a Kohen. Now, the guy who divorced her died. As far as Joe is concerned, she's an almana, right? She's not a divorcee because as far as Joe's concerned, she was still married to him, but he died now. So she's an almana. Grusha, it's a call. Makal said, my Grusha, Shikala Grusha, which is a lesser thing, it's only a lav. Asura, she can't marry any Kohen because Mishum Tzadker Chamura. Here she's partially married still, right? Because she's married, as far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to the first guy. So Lakoshkein, she shouldn't be able to marry somebody else. She shouldn't be able to marry anybody else. Again, if you say on the condition you don't marry Joe, okay, she doesn't marry him. She's as far as sleeping with him, she is considered Grusha. I'm divorcing you from everybody on the condition that you don't marry Joe. Okay, so as far as sleeping with Joe, she's a grusha, right? She's a grusha. So she is a grusha. So what do you mean? She's the Elam of Almanas, right? And therefore, Rashi explains then it's not a kal v'chomer anymore because a kal v'chomer is if she's a partial marriage, she's partially divorced. Is strong enough to keep from marrying any Cohen. Certainly, if she's partially married, but now she's not partially divorced because, as far as everybody, even as far as Joe is concerned, she's divorced. She just can't marry Joe, but she can sleep with him. Ella b'chutz. The answer is we're not talking about an almanas, but rather b'chutz. I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe. So as far as Joe's concerned, she's married. See, if she's almanas, I'm divorcing everybody, including from Joe, on the condition you don't marry Joe. So she's divorced from Joe too. So if she slept with Joe, not Ashish ish. But if I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe, then as far as Joe's concerned, she's still married to the first husband. Ella b'chutz, and that was his problem. So he's still married to the first husband. But the answer is, as we said, that Ella b'chutz. So he says Ella b'chutz, and therefore, right? That was the Davar Acher. And that's what so what's the kasha? So what if it's b'chutz? Rabbi Kiva, I understand. If it's b'chutz virulei los of chutz, v'yal manas virulei los of manas. Rabbi Kiva has two kashas. The first one was based on, as we just said, the first one was based on the fact that it's almanas, and the second one was based on the chutz. So which one is it? Right? We said it's first one's almanas. That's no good, and that's one's of chutz. So what does Rabbi Kiva hold? Rabbi Kiva ifutz virulei los of chutz. The almanas virulei to almanas. Why is he asking kashas from different points of view? The answer is Rabbi Kiva shmielei b'ikadam chutz. Some said that Rabbi Lezer said is halacha by chutz. I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe. No, that's not good. Even Rabbi Lezer's motive that divorcing everybody except for Joe doesn't work like Rabbanan. He only said it by almanas. He get almanas. Mandar chutz. Hi Pirch. If you learn in b'chutz, I'm guessing this kasha. Mandar almanas, the first kasha. Well, my Pirch, what's the kasha in b'chutz? We just explained. If you marry a Kohen, it comes out what she's married to a Kohen. If Joe was a Kohen, she's divorced from. As far as Joe's concerned, she's an almana, and as far as everybody else is concerned, she's a grusha. So if by a grusha she's considered a partial grusha is considered grusha, so a partial marriage also should be considered partially married. The answer is again it's kasha from kuna. Why? Name Isser kuna shiny or a blazer nami Isser kuna ma'isla. If you're saying you can't ask kasha from Kohen because Isser kuna has chumras and you can't ask kasha from Kohen, Rav Lezer also basically learned his halacha from Kohen. Because what do we say? How did Rav Lezer say that if you only divorce from one, you're divorced from everybody except for Joe, that it's considered a divorce? Because he said, Isha grusha ve'isha lo yikacha. Even if she's divorced from one guy, she's considered divorced. The answer is he doesn't look baser than that. He doesn't learn with that. The answer is Rava, who asked this kasha, Rava who brought this up, did not learn it based on Isha Gusha, but the first answer of Rabbi Yanai Mishum Zakan Echad, 6 lines down on Pei Beis and Beis, he said, based on how do you know the divorce from one guy you're divorced? Because Yasami Beis of Alcha Lishachter. Even if she's only mutter to marry one other guy, that's also considered a divorce. So that's what he based on, not the pasuk of Kohen, and therefore it's not a kasha. And therefore the refutation of Kiva is you can't ask kasha from Kohen. Kiva's dovrach was whatever she marries a Kohen. If Joe is a Kohen, as far as Joe is concerned, she's an almana. As far as everybody's concerned, she's a grusha. So if she's partially married to one, certainly it's a kal v'chomer from get. Where you're only partial, certainly, which is a lav, certainly by Isser H6, which is more chomer, the answer is no. As far as everybody's concerned, right, it can't be almanas, it's bechutz, but the answer is that Isser Kuna shine, you can't ask gas from going because Isser Kuna is different. Amar no Yeshua, so Yeshua said, so Yeshua told all of them that, you know what, you can't ask a kasha on a lion after he's dead, lachar misa. In other words, you can't ask kasha from blazer after he died. The name of Yeshua Kavasir that he holds like a blazer. But you nami mifrach. He was, we're going to see in a minute. He also has the kasha. Yeshua was a 5th rabbi who had a kasha on Reb Lezer. The Didi nami is to I also have a kasha on Reb Lezer. Me who bein the Didi ben Sai according to me, Sai according to you. I have a kasha on Reb Lezer too, but you can't ask a kasha on him after he died. Well, my pirch Yeshua was what's Yeshua's kasha. But the Tanya Yeshua. Makash kavni avaya shniya, lekavni avaya shana. Pasuk says, "Ish kikach isha, kikach ish isha, v'alesnea, v'rasal sefer krisus v'yatzim v'beisav ha'chazesh." You marry a person marries a man marries a woman, and he doesn't like her. He divorces her and he sends her somebody to somebody else. So she marries somebody else. So there's a heckish between the second marriage and the first marriage. Just like before the first marriage, she wasn't married at all. She was totally free. Same thing. Before the second marriage, she has to be totally free. The beginning before the second marriage, but to before the first marriage. Just like before the first marriage, she's not attached to anybody. Before the second marriage, also. In other words, it's only a proper divorce before the second marriage if she's totally divorced. It doesn't work for partial. So all these rabbis had kashas on Rabbi Eliezer, and we don't pass him like Rabbi Eliezer. And the only one that wasn't refuted was Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, because that's simply not cutting off. Gufa, Motor Rabbi Eliezer Megarish we had before in Amid Aleph twice, that even Rabbi Eliezer who says that if you divorce her except for Joe, it's a good divorce and she can't marry Joe. But he's Moda that if she marries somebody else in between, then she's totally cut off. And even as far as Joe's concerned, she's not married anymore to the first guy. Gufa, Motor Rabbi Eliezer Megarish Ploni, she married Yankel. And she was widowed or divorced from Yankel. Shemuteres was love. She's mutter to marry Joe. Hey, I understand that. I understand. The first guy answered her, and the second guy married her. The first marriage answered her to marry anybody else except for Joe. And then the second marriage, she married Yankel, some other guy in between. He was matter. Where do you find that one person can answer, another person can be matter? Says, well, why not? Or a Yavama. If I Yavam, the Baal also be of matter. The Yavam, the Baal asks her to marry somebody else, and the Yavam is matter when he marries her. Then she's mutter to either stay married to him, get a get, or if he dies, she's mutter to marry somebody else. The Hasam Yavam Nudakasa there, it's not the Baal's answering. For right, the Baal Hashari B'Kaima. The husband's dead. What's answering her to marry somebody else? That's the fact that there's a Yavam there. So it's not one person answering, one person matter, right? The husband answers. And the husband's matter, and the Yavam is answering her. All right, Nadarim. What about Nadarim? The Noder also, the Noder, the one who makes the vow, he answers himself, and the Chacham is matters. There you find one person's answers and one person prohibits and one permits. A Chacham is only matter by if he can show that the person who made the neder regrets what he did. So he basically is matter his own neder. It's not the Chacham has power to do anything. He's simply saying that had you known this, you wouldn't have made the neder. You regret what you did, and therefore he's not being matter. The person himself is being matter. What about the husband? The husband breaks his wife's neder. She made the neder, and he's matter. So here you see one person answers. She answers herself. She prohibits herself, and the husband's matter. Says Habal says the issue there is the husband, the wife makes the neder Baal Mefer, and he breaks it. Hasam could have Pinchas Mishad Rava. There's like the Amar Pinchas Rava. When a woman makes an neder, she makes an neder on the condition that her husband's going to agree. So she effectively is being matter her own neder. It's not like she made it neder, the husband's matter. She's only making the neder on the condition that her husband agrees. If the husband doesn't agree, she never really made the neder. So in all these cases, it's not where one person made a neder and the other person's one person asks, one person prohibits, and therefore, Rav Shimon Elazar had a different kasha on Rav Elazar. Elazar says that if I divorce except for Joe and she marries somebody else, then she could marry Joe. How do you find that the first person asked her and the second person's matter? That's not a good kasha. Then Rav Elazar but Azariah Amar Krisis of our course Ben Obenol. I'm not changing Krisis. So that's what Rav Elazar's Azariah is the kasha which stands on Rav Elazar. It's not cutting off. You have to be totally divorced. For Rabbanan and the other rabbis who don't agree with that kasha, not the Rabbanan who disagree with Rav Elazar, but the kasha, the ones who asked a different kasha, Rav Tarfon, Rav Akiva, Asiglili, why don't they ask the kasha if it's not creases? High creases my up delay. Chorus has to be totally cut off. No, I'm divorcing on the condition you don't drink wine. I'm not on the condition you don't go to your father's house. Olam. If I say you can't drink wine forever, you can never go to your mother's house forever. That's not a divorce. Ain't a creases, right? Because it has to be totally cut off. Shloshim, if we do it for a finite time, for 30 days, I raise a creases, right? That's what they use creases for. Not that it's to be totally cut off, you can't be married to somebody else, but rather that it's got to be totally cut off from this marriage and not you can't be tied with some condition. Either Alas Rebelleslin, Bikoris creases. He says because it could have said say for Koris and it says for creases. So you learn out both things. Both that you have to be totally divorced from this man. You can't be on a condition you're not going to marry Joe, or on the condition that I'm divorcing you from everybody except for Joe, and that it's got to be, if you make a condition, it's about to be a finite condition that has a finite period of time. Right. So no, again, Rav Elazar, we hold that you can't make a condition. We hold right. If you made it, we hold according to the Rabbanan. We disagree with Rav Elazar making a condition for 5 years that it would work. Except maybe the Rabbanan would agree with Rav Elazar that if she marries somebody else in between, then the first condition falls off. That could be. So v'idach karish creases not v'idach karish creases no darshi. In other words, the other rabbis don't learn karish creases. Just said learn creases, and creases teaches me it's got to be a funny. Amar Rabba. I'm divorcing condition. You don't drink wine my entire life. Ain't a creases. That's not a creases because it's she's always tied to him as long as he's alive. All the days my ploni I raise a creases. Then it is a creases. My shachai ploni. Why is it different if I talk about all the entire lifetime of some guy? Because maybe he's going to die. And that's okay. Tonight's the condition will be fulfilled. As long as he's alive, you can't drink wine. Maybe he'll die first time. If I say I'm divorcing in the condition you can't drink wine your entire life, the wife's entire life, so her entire life she's bound by that condition. That's not creases. He says on his life, or or somebody else's life, raise increases because that condition might be fulfilled. It's not, she might outlive him. Most women outlive their husbands, right? So that's a condition that will not be her entire life. If you make some conditions, say on the condition that you don't go to the bank your entire life, you don't drink wine your entire life, you don't go to your mother's house your entire life, that's not a condition. That's not a good condition because it's a condition which is never ending. It never has an opportunity to end, and therefore it's no good. Your kasha is a good kasha. If you say for 5 years, what would the Rabbanan say? According to Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Elazar, it's for sure good. Rabbi Elazar says I can say I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe, without any limits of time, right? So according to Rabbi Elazar, it's for sure good, but we don't hold like Rabbi Elazar. We hold like Rabbanan that say you can't make it. That doesn't work either because it's creases or all these other conditions. But basically, it's not cutting off. I'm divorcing everybody except for Joe. You can't do that. Now, al Manasseh, you don't marry Joe. That's a condition. That condition could work. Al Manasseh, you're married for 5 years. That for sure could work. On the condition that you don't marry Joe your whole life, that wouldn't work because if you're bound for your whole life. On a condition for 5 years, that might work, even according to Rabbanan. All right. One more piece, a little piece to the end of the page. So let's say he says, I'm divorcing you today, but not till tomorrow. Just you're divorced for a day. You know, queen for a day, you're divorced for a day. Today you're not my wife. Today you are my mouth. So both according to say you can maybe Rav Elazar says what? That the one I'm being matter Joe, or everybody else who you could marry, you can marry forever. It's not, you're not only divorced for a day, you're divorced totally for everybody except for Joe. But over here, you're not even divorced from everybody. You're only divorced for a day. That doesn't work. Oh, Dilma Loshna, or maybe it doesn't make any difference. You could. I can't look on whether Rabban say it doesn't work because she's never cut off from him. Keeping the paska, once it's cut off totally. Maybe it would work without a condition. In other words, boy, after he has the kasha or the pashta, keeping the paska. In other words, if he says, I'm divorcing you for it now, but tomorrow you're not divorced, that in other words, she's divorced. And the condition doesn't work. If she's divorced totally, we need a new marriage in order to work. If he's not a Kohen, he can marry her again. But if he says, I'm divorcing you today, and tomorrow you're not divorced, that doesn't work. She's divorced totally. That's how he comes out. All right, we'll pick up here tomorrow. Have a good day.